My question is to the new Attorney-General, Ms Symes, who I congratulate on her appointment. It follows my 10th of December question without notice to former Attorney-General Hennessy about the remarkable decrease during 2020 in the number of people held in Victorian jails. It also follows revelations from journalist Anika Simonis in last Sunday's Herald Sun. These show that around 5,000 convicted criminals have been released early because of the special COVID-19 Emergency Management Day rules. Attorney, will you be intervening in any way in your capacity as the First Law Officer of Victoria to ensure the arrangements that have allowed the Commissioner of Corrections and or anyone else to grant these substantial sentence reductions are not used again?
Thank you, President, and I certainly thank Ms Maxwell for her question and indeed acknowledging my new position as Attorney-General, and obviously going to have great interest in having ongoing conversations with not only Ms Maxwell, because I know that there's a lot of people that are passionate about the rights of victims, but indeed something that Ms Maxwell has indeed been consistent on. I would note, Ms Maxwell, that your specific question here is more appropriately directed to the Minister for Corrections, and I think picking up on the question that we just received from Mr Quilty, as the Attorney-General, as the Minister responsible for the coordination of the Justice Department, I do acknowledge that there are going to be questions that will be directed to me that I will make all attempts to answer, but if they are more appropriately supposed to be directed to corrections, victim support or indeed youth justice, the appropriate Minister is Ms Teeny. Having said that, I will make attempts to give some general commentary, but I don't think it would be a good practice for me to take over the responsibility of all the justice portfolios in this situation. So just in relation to the Corrections Commissioner and directly in relation to Ms...
Order. Ms Maxwell on a point of order.
Thank you, President, and sorry to interrupt on a point of order, but the challenges come when we ask questions to particular ministers and are provided guidance elsewhere prior to submitting our question, and it's my understanding that my advisor did liaise with other people to ensure that this question was appropriately directed to the Attorney-General. So I just ask for some clarification on that.
Thank you. I really appreciate the assistance from Ms Jacqueline in the beginning about the question and trying to answer, but I believe it's a legitimate answer to the Attorney-General, and the Attorney-General has indicated it's about the law and everything, but the main one is the correction, but a leader is trying to cover the whole question. So please, Ms Symes, to continue.
Yeah. And as I said, it's certainly not my intention to not answer questions, and I'm certainly happy to work with members because there's a lot of crossover in Justice portfolio, whether it's with the Family Violence Minister, Aboriginal Affairs Minister, and indeed the corrections staff. So this isn't going to be perfect. Let's just sort of see how we go, and I'm more than happy to talk to members offline if they want some assistance in where we think we can help direct it to the right the right place. But the Corrections Commissioner is the person who has the power to grant emergency management days to prisoners, and this has been the case for nearly 30 years. It is an established practice and certainly has continued regardless of who has been in government. Emergency management days can be granted when a prisoner's sentence is harsher than what the court would have expected, for example, if they are detained in their cell for longer than usual. This government has been very clear that emergency management days are not a right. Indeed, we passed laws last year to ensure that any prisoner who is involved in a disturbance such as a prison riot gives up the privilege of being considered for these days in the future. However, in relation to your specific question about whether I would intervene, it's important to be clear that the power to grant emergency management days sits with the Commissioner. That is what the Corrections Act says, and so it is not appropriate for me or any other minister to interfere with how the Commissioner performs her statutory functions.
Ms Maxwell on the supplementary.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Minister, for that clarification. Attorney, obviously even law-abiding Victorians' freedoms were very heavily restricted throughout 2020. I'm therefore sure I speak for many of them when I say that COVID restrictions applied to prisoners weren't particularly exceptional when compared with the deprivation of liberties and movement experienced by the rest of the population as well. Accordingly, I ask, in light of the extraordinary COVID-related sentence reductions given to convicted criminals, what extra publicly funded support, if any, has the government made available to these perpetrators' victims? I ask that not only because of the additional anxiety, inconvenience and stress that those victims have likewise endured from the lockdowns, but also the increased trauma and risk created for many of them by the very prospect of their offenders being released from jail early.
Yes, thank you, President, and I thank Ms Maxwell for her supplementary. We as a government are certainly committed to delivering and reforming the Victims of Crime financial and service support system, and this is something that Minister Hutchins has been very tireless in, and certainly been cognizant of the impact of the pandemic on victims. I wholeheartedly agree with your assessment that every person in the society was affected by lockdown, but if you have pre-existing trauma and isolation can in fact be can exacerbate some of those conditions, and obviously as a victim in crime quite often isolation is already something that they may be experiencing. So it is undoubtedly that for many victims lockdown may have been, impacts of lockdown may have been more acute than others. We have invested $4.3 million in victim services, the helpline, the victims register and extending the interventory pilot program, and continue to support victims now as always, but indeed very conscious of post-pandemic conditions and what the government can do to make sure that, as always, we're supporting them as best as possible.
Thank you.